Hey, welcome back to the WorshipSoundCo podcast. We're excited to have you back for part 2 of our conversation with HW from Tone Junkie TV. So we're just going to dive straight into the conversation.
Sometimes I think our perspective as guitar players, we can forget how hard it was to learn all the stuff that we know. You know, like what a bad cat and a matchless does.
Mm-hmm.
And it took a while to get there. And so like with digital, it's like starting over, and that's can be a very uncomfortable feeling because all of a sudden, like you can get a graphic EQ that says 160, 320, 640, 1280, 350, and at 24K, and then you're just like at 2.4K, and then you end up it feels like you're starting over. It feels like what's a Fender, what's a Vox, and they can be very difficult to use, but like. Most of us didn't know that our Fender Frontman was probably not going to get us the sound we were after when we bought them with our first guitar or whatever. Like you just did it, or Blues Junior. Whatever the first amp was. So there is a real learning curve, and you got some units out there like the Kemper, which is clearly designed by an engineer. No real. It's not an excellent piece of gear in terms of UI.
Right. Yeah. Amen on that one.
Yeah. But then you got the Helix, and it's better, and it feels a little more. And and then you got like there's an Axe out there, which is probably like the Android of phones. It's like if you're a tinkerer, go for it. But everybody else maybe just want an iPhone, and that's the Helix.
Dude, that's literally. I feel like the Kemper is like the Apple of the.
It might be the Kemper. Maybe the Kemper. Yeah.
It really is. It's like, oh, you just want this to do like kind of what you want it to do and nothing else. Okay, okay, there it is.
Yeah, there's some things you can't change, But overall, I'll tell you, I was thinking of this as you were talking about the amps and stuff. Overall, I think the whole trend has been really overall, not just in digital, but towards analog as well, with all the amp makers. The trend of the past 10, 20 years has been portability. And that, I think, is the overall thing. Because even right now, a deluxe reverb and a Princeton from the mid-'60s is more expensive than a Twin or a Super from the same year. And I don't think that was true prior to like 2008. Probably like early 2000s. I remember going on the gear page as a young lad trying to learn all this stuff. And those guys had big amps. Like Germino was a big name, and people still the boutique companies were still pretty Marshall based. And there was a lot of Vox stuff, but it was still about heavy amps. And now I feel like the trend is all about 112 grab and go, everything smaller, Matchless putting out 15-watt versions of all their stuff. Everything is small, low wattage, and that's, amp manufacturers doing what they can to kind of give people what they want. But I think it's a combination of just like, the internet and all of human knowledge is in our hands all the time, and we don't want to carry 412s anymore. And then as a result, you see a lot of people going direct, and you even see a lot of people saying, the Helix is too big. Can I just put it all on my Stomp? I wish the Stomp had more stuff. It's like the Stomp is like as big as a big Stomp. That's your entire rig. If you have baggy pants, you could put it in your pocket. So a 90s hip hop artist could carry the whole band's rig.
Yeah, maybe JNCO Jeans needs to come out with the Helix Stomp.
Helix pocket.
Helix pocket.
Yeah.
Just random side note. Speaking of small amps, were you at Winter NAMM this year?
I was. Yeah.
Did you get to mess with the Bad Cat Paw any?
That's an interesting thing, because that, along with like what Sir is doing, really seems like the next evolution of the tube amp, which is Sir went with, here's an all tube amp that will take a popular 100-watt model, the PT100, we'll scale it down, the PT15, and what we're going to do is put a load box inside with an IR loader. And this is really smart, because they've taken the tube amp and they've added on the functionality of what makes digital great, which now you can take a small amplifier. When you're at home, you plug it into your cabinet, you're ready to go. You're playing like normal. When you're live, you have sound on stage, but you can go direct and not mess with microphones. And when you need to have a silent stage, or you need to do late night recording or whatever in a home studio, you can go direct. But the Bad Cat's doing something very similar where they've actually taken the tube preamp and phase inverter of I think it's a Cub 40 or Cub 30, I don't know what models, and they've paired it with a Class D solid state power amp. So no need for a load box, no need to figure out how to not make tubes blow themselves up, because tube power amps, they want to explode, and that's like part of their magic. So you have to stop them from doing that. So by using this Class D solid state power amp, you can run speakers on stages. You can go completely silent. You can go, and they built in little desktop speakers. So you can play it as like a desktop amp. You can bring it with you. I heard that thing at NAMM. They plugged it into a big 212, and it really sounded good. I got to be honest. I was surprised, because even when I hear solid state power amp, come on, what's that about?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a Tone Junkie. I'm a tube snob at heart, but it sounded good. It really did sound good. I think there's some future evolutions there. I ran into Joey Landreth at NAMM, and Joey Landreth, killer player. He told me, he was nice enough to, while I was waiting for my Uber, or while he was waiting for his Uber and I was just sitting around, he talked to me while the Uber was on its way. And I told him what I did, and he said that he was actually letting the sound man, his sound guy who he traveled with, make the determination of whether they would use cabs on stage or whether they would use two-note cab, like IR loaders. Yeah. And it was just up to the size of the room. And they had an IR they had shot with his mics, or their mics they were using, and his cabinet. And he would just go direct to his in-ears. And if it was a bigger stage, he had the two-rock cab on stage with them. And I think that's the kind of versatility that is like required today that wasn't required in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and maybe even early aughts, but it is required today. It's certainly required under quarantine when you can't leave your house. And
absolutely.
Yeah, there's definitely, I think, as like a whole in the digital versus analog realm, something you mentioned earlier, like the romanticism of hearing it, and even how you grew up, your first amp, like putting it in your room and kind of just feeling it on your feet as your, floor vibrated a little bit when you turned it too loud. And there's something that I think a lot of people who lean on the analog side of things, that romanticism is there, and the memories and stuff. And I think that's the beauty of analog and tube. But I think that pairing it together with digital stuff, I think there's definitely like Bad Cat's doing, and Sir and all these people, it's taking it back to the romanticism of it, and still keeping, technology pushing forward, because tube technology is so stinking old, and we're still, it sounds great. It's super dynamic, especially in a room when you're just listening, but yeah, especially for live gigs and professionals that really want to push the envelope and find different tones. The digital world is kind of like an exciting Wild West in some ways, where you're like, what can I do with algorithms and, computer programming into tone? And it's exciting to see what's out there. Do you have anything you're excited about that you're working on, or technology that's excites you?
I think where the world goes with the capture tech is really almost limitless, because it's really only been attempted a couple times, and it seems to be, in my opinion, pretty darn good. So I think as they keep going with this capture tech, and how do we capture what we hear out of an amplifier, but then also how do we mimic maybe what the ear hears, or how it hears live, as opposed to through the filter of microphones and outboard gear. There is not a reason, they had this new tube technology. I think Korg had it. And it's kind of the unfortunate thing is, something like that will never really take off as long as one person owns, like a patent on it. Because tubes were widely used for all electronics, audio and visual electronics. So, and that's one of the reasons it's really hard to copyright the circuits. And so you have all these people just sort of borrowing, copying from each other and stuff, even as early as like Jim Marshall and stuff. But that technology should actually like be the next step. I don't know that it will be. I think we just leapfrog to digital, but really just taking that tube component and making it a component that's much smaller, but that behaves in exactly the same way, which on paper those do. They can build a new tube that in every way measures the same as a 6L6 or an EL34, and they're just not using a vacuum glass bottle to do it. But I don't know how many people have new tube technology on their board. I don't think any.
And just for clarification, he's not saying noob tube for any of you Call of Duty players out there.
And NU-tube, and that's another reason. NU-tube sounds like a Limp Bizkit genre of like music. It's like new metal or something.
Yeah,
they should have called it worship tube.
P&W tubes. Could go.
Oh wow, that would sell.
A line of praise and worship tubes just for praise and worship Tone.
I mean, I think you could literally sell those. For real, man.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for tuning in to part 2 of our podcast with Tone Junkie TV. We'll be back for a part 3, but in the meantime, make sure to check out Tone Junkie's stuff. Follow him on Instagram. If you want to follow us on Instagram too, WorshipSoundCo, feel free. But we'll be back next time. Appreciate you guys. Have a good one.